Welcome to Skytech-Lens. In early 2024, Ford stunned America's industrial heartland with a $3 billion investment, not in Detroit or Ohio, but in Oakville, Ontario. The plan retooled the Canadian plant to build Super Duty pickup trucks, long a symbol of American industry. For workers in Michigan and Kentucky, it felt like a betrayal. The trucks that defined Made in America would now be built in Canada. As Oakville prepared for its transformation, U.S. plants faced idling lines and rumors of job cuts. Canada gained thousands of high-paying jobs, while American communities that built Ford were left reeling. The move clashed with years of political promises to reshore manufacturing. Was the U.S. manufacturing ecosystem no longer competitive? Had protectionist policies backfired? For families in Detroit and beyond, these weren't abstract debates. They were about mortgages and the future. Ford insisted its U.S. plants were at capacity, but that was little comfort to those watching opportunity move north. The decision was a stark reminder. In global automaking, investment follows cold, hard logic, not national pride. In 2025 for Ford, that logic pointed to Canada. Ford's move wasn't about patriotism, it was about capacity and survival. U.S. plants were maxed out, unable to meet surging demand for profitable trucks without costly, slow expansions. Originally, Oakville was set to build EVs, but as electric vehicle demand softened and Ford's EV division bled billions, priorities shifted. Ford Pro, the commercial vehicle arm, was thriving. The answer was clear: use Oakville for trucks. The Canadian plant could be retooled faster and cheaper than building new U.S. capacity. Meanwhile, U.S. labor unrest and strikes had driven up costs and risk. Canada offered labor stability, a priceless asset for a decade-long investment. The business case was simple: follow the money, minimize risk, and meet demand. Ford's U.S. plants were full. Oakville was the logical next step. This wasn't about politics, it was about spreadsheets and survival. For Ford, Canada was the smart bet. Canada's appeal to Ford went far beyond geography. Ontario's clean, affordable hydroelectric power gave Ford a major cost and sustainability edge. Modern infrastructure, ports, railways, highways, seamlessly connected to the U.S., keeping supply chains humming. The Canadian government offered real incentives and streamlined regulations, not just rhetoric. Labor stability was key. While U.S. plants faced strikes, Canadian unions secured deals with minimal disruption. A skilled workforce in southern Ontario sealed the deal. These advantages weren't accidental, they were the result of deliberate policy. Canada positioned itself as a reliable partner, not just a competitor. For Ford, Oakville wasn't just viable, it was strategically brilliant. The investment de-risked Ford's future for one of its most important product lines. Canada's long game paid off. As Ford's Canadian plans took shape, the U.S. escalated its trade dispute, slapping tariffs up to 50% on Canadian and Mexican steel, aluminum, and copper. The goal forced manufacturing back to the U.S. The result? Chaos. North American supply chains, deeply integrated, meant these tariffs were a tax on U.S. production. Building a car in Detroit suddenly cost thousands more. U.S. steel prices soared, making American factories the most expensive in the world. The tariffs, meant to protect U.S. industry, made it uncompetitive globally. Automakers faced a choice: absorb costs and lose profits, or raise prices and risk sales. Ford's Canadian expansion now looked like genius, insulated from the worst fallout. GM and Fiat Chrysler reported billions in losses. Ford's Oakville move hedged against the policy storm. The tariff gambit backfired, punishing the very industries it aimed to protect. Canada became an even more attractive haven for manufacturing. The lesson: protectionism can have brutal, unintended consequences. Ford's timing couldn't have been better. The 2025 tariffs hit American families fast. Car prices soared by thousands, putting new vehicles out of reach for many and fueling inflation. As sales faltered, automakers slashed production and jobs. U.S. auto output was projected to drop by 11% in 2026. Layoffs surged, with jobless claims hitting a 4-year high. Major manufacturers like PACCAR, GM, and Fiat Chrysler reported massive losses, blaming tariffs. Investments were canceled, projects delayed, and jobs lost. The policy meant to revive U.S. manufacturing triggered a painful contraction instead. Even the U.S. steel industry, supposedly protected, saw idle capacity and high prices. The result: higher costs for consumers, less job security for workers. The tariffs didn't bring prosperity, they brought hardship. The dream of an industrial revival turned into an economic nightmare. The cost of protectionism was paid by American families. Canada refused to escalate the trade war. Instead, it lifted many retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, signaling a willingness to negotiate. But it kept protections on steel, aluminum, and autos, its core industries. This two-pronged approach de-escalated tensions while preserving leverage. Constructive talks soon followed, shifting the tone from hostility to resolution. Canada's strategy allowed the U.S. to save face while showing international leadership. The message: Canada would defend its interests, but preferred solutions over conflict. By combining targeted protection with open dialogue, Canada protected its industries and paved the way for peace. Diplomacy, not escalation, proved the smarter path. Canada's real power wasn't just tariffs, it was resources. The U.S. depends on Canadian electricity, importing enough to power nearly 1 million homes. With U.S. demand set to double, this reliance will only grow. Canada is also a top supplier of uranium, nickel, cobalt, and potash, critical for energy, EVs, and agriculture. In a world where China and Russia dominate supply chains, Canada is a secure, friendly source. This resource wealth gives Canada quiet but immense bargaining power. The economic relationship is a two-way street. The U.S. needs what Canada has. Prime Minister Carney's outreach to Europe reminded Washington that Canada has other options. In geopolitics, power is measured in gigawatts and minerals, not just GDP. Canada's leverage is real and growing. Ironically, U.S. tariffs sparked a Canadian manufacturing boom. As American goods grew pricier, Canadian companies seized the moment, capturing market share at home. Protectionist walls forced Canadian businesses to innovate and expand. In Quebec, a can manufacturer doubled sales and built a new plant in Windsor, creating over 100 jobs. Hamilton announced a new steel facility to strengthen domestic supply chains. The message to Canadian investors: build at home, now. Investment surged across industries, from food to steel to technology. Shielded from U.S. competition, Canadian firms thrived, hiring and modernizing. The U.S. aimed to make foreign production costly, but underestimated Canada's resilience. Instead of jobs moving south, tariffs fertilized a Canadian industrial resurgence. The law of unintended consequences struck again. Sometimes protectionism grows your neighbor's economy instead. As the dust settles, one truth is clear. The U.S. and Canada are partners in a deeply integrated economy. Ford's investment and the tariff fallout proved that harming one side hurts both. The North American auto industry's cross-border supply chains are a source of strength, not weakness. Trying to unravel this web with tariffs only shatters the system. Recent talks hint at a shift toward cooperation. The future depends on collaboration, strengthening trade agreements, securing supply chains, and investing in new technologies together. Canada's resources and stability, paired with America's market and innovation, can create a continental powerhouse. Prosperity is shared. A thriving Canada is good for the U.S., and vice versa. Leaders must move beyond zero-sum thinking to embrace mutual growth. In the end, the logic of cooperation is inescapable. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel for more updates.